The hydraulic lock on the apartment door engaged with a sound that was less of a click and more of a heavy industrial thud. It was the sound of safety. It was the sound of isolation. Adrian Locke pressed his forehead against the cool composite metal of the doorframe for exactly 5 seconds. It was a ritual. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He breathed in the filtered, recycled air of Hushbourne habitat, which today smelled faintly of ozone and synthetic lemon. No heroes today, Adrian whispered to the empty foyer of his quarters. No crises, no variables. He was a man who lived his life by a checklist. He was a system auditor for the atmospheric regulation grid. His life was binary. Things were either within operational parameters or they were not. If they were not, he flagged them and someone else fixed them. He did not fix things. He did not get his hands dirty. He certainly did not get involved in the messy, chaotic sprawl of interpersonal drama that plagued the lower sectors of the station. Adrian stripped off his gray duty uniform, folded it with geometric precision, and placed it on the chair. He checked the window opacity. It was set to 100% blackout. He checked the thermostat. It was set to a crisp 18 degrees Celsius. He climbed into bed, pulled the thermal duvet up to his chin, and closed his eyes. The hum of the station, a vibration so low it was felt in the teeth rather than heard, lulled him toward sleep. He was alone. He was safe. He was bored. It was perfect. Adrian woke up because the air displacement in the room had changed. He did not open his eyes immediately. His auditor's brain began running a diagnostic. The temperature had risen by perhaps 2 degrees. There was a smell. It was not synthetic lemon. It smelled of wet copper, static electricity, and something musky, like a wet dog that had rolled in pine needles. And there was the weight. The mattress, usually a flat, firm plane reserved solely for his own lanky frame, was depressed on the left side. A significant mass was displacing the memory foam. Adrian opened his eyes. The room was pitch black, save for the standby light of the air purifier. But as his eyes adjusted, the silhouette became undeniably clear. There was a shape under his duvet, a large shape. He lay frozen, his heart rate spiking from a resting 60 beats to a hammering 120 in the span of 3 seconds. He ran through the logical possibilities. A malfunction in the gravity plating, a prank by the guys in Sector 7, a hallucination brought on by atmospheric toxicity. The shape shifted. The duvet rustled. A head poked out from beneath the covers, resting on the spare pillow that Adrian kept only for symmetry. It was not a human head. Triangular ears covered in sleek, dark fur twitched. A snout, elegant, but undeniably predatory, rested on the pillowcase. Yellow eyes, luminous and slitted, blinked at him in the semi-darkness. Adrian opened his mouth to scream. It was the biological imperative. It was the correct procedure for waking up next to a carnivore. "Please do not scream," the wolf woman said. Her voice was rasping like gravel, sliding down a metal chute, but the tone was mortifyingly polite. "It is embarrassing enough as it is." Adrian's scream died in his throat, choked off by the sheer absurdity of the statement. He stared. He blinked. He reached out and turned on the bedside lamp to the lowest setting. The light revealed a nightmare that was trying very hard to be a houseguest. It was definitely a she, judging by the timbre of the voice, and the structure of the face was a Lycari. He had seen them in the text files usually associated with high-risk security alerts or bounty posters. She was covered in fine, dark gray fur that shimmered slightly under the lamp. Her human-like shoulders were bare, but the duvet covered the rest of her. She lay on her side facing him, her hands tucked under her cheek in a pose that could only be described as domestic. "You," Adrian squeaked. He cleared his throat and tried to summon his professional baritone. "You are in my bed." "I am," she agreed. She did not move. "Your mattress creates excellent spinal support. Is it orthopedic?" Adrian sat up slowly, pushing his back against the headboard. He pulled his knees to his chest, putting a wall of duvet between his vital organs and the apex predator. This is a violation of Sector 4 residential codes. Unauthorized entry, trespassing, potential biological hazard. I wiped my feet, she said. You wiped your feet, Adrian repeated flatly. Well, that changes everything. I suppose I will just go make tea while you decide which of my limbs to eat first. The Likari sighed, a sound that ended in a low chuff. I do not eat engineers. You taste like caffeine and anxiety. Too acidic. I am an auditor, Adrian corrected automatically, then clamped his mouth shut. Why are you here? How did you get in? The lock is biometric. Your ventilation shaft has a filter bypass latch that has not been serviced in 3 years, she said. You should write a report about it. Adrian felt a flash of genuine professional irritation. I flagged that latch last quarter. Maintenance marked it as low priority. Lucky for me, she murmured. Her yellow eyes drifted closed for a second, then snapped open, fighting exhaustion. I need you to listen to me, auditor. And I need you to not touch the alarm panel on your nightstand. If you do, I will be forced to restrain you, and I promise you, I am much faster than your finger. Adrian's hand hovered 3 inches from the panic button. He looked at her. Really looked at her. Under the harsh light of the lamp, the threat began to decompose into data points. She was shivering. The metallic smell was blood. There was a dark, matted patch of fur on her shoulder and another on her flank. Her breathing was shallow and controlled the deliberate respiration of someone trying not to pass out. You're hurt, Adrian said. I am inconvenienced, she corrected. You are bleeding on my 800 credit sheets. I will pay for dry cleaning. With what currency? Adrian snapped, his panic finally finding an outlet in sarcasm. Do you have a stash of untracked credits in your fur? Are you going to pay me in squirrel carcasses? My name is Tamsin, she said, ignoring his outburst. And I am here because the moonlight census begins in 2 hours. The words hung in the air, heavy and cold. Adrian's hand dropped away from the alarm. The moonlight census. Every citizen on Hushbourne Habitat knew what that meant. It was the biannual audit of the biological stock. The station's central AI, a monolithic processor known as the core, would sweep the habitat with resonance waves, light scent, heartbeat, and neural electricity to catalog every living thing on board. It was sold as a safety measure, a way to optimize life support. But everyone knew it was a hunting license. Any biological signature that was not registered, not stamped, and not authorized was flagged for removal. The census scans for unlinked biometrics, Adrian said, his voice dropping. If you are here, the sweep will pick you up. You are a massive anomaly. You are basically a neon sign saying illegal alien in the middle of a residential block. That is why I am in your bed, Tamsin said. She shifted, wincing as her shoulder touched the mattress. The core's sensors are calibrated to ignore small variances in occupied units. If I am alone in a vent, I am a target. If I am here in close proximity to a registered citizen with a strong lawful signature, the sensors will read us as a single complex heat bloom. It creates a masking effect. A shadow. Adrian stared at her. You are using me as human shielding. You are hiding in my heat signature. I prefer to think of it as a cuddle for survival, she said dryly. This is insane. If they find you, I lose my clearance. I lose my pension. I could be sent to the reclamation decks. They will not find me, Tamsin said. Not if you stay in bed. Not if you keep your heart rate down. The scan passes through Sector 4 at 4 a.m. Once it is done, I will vanish. Just like that. Just like that. Adrian looked at the clock. It was 3:15 in the morning. He looked at the wolf woman. She was trembling more violently now. The blood on her shoulder was fresh. Why are they hunting you? Adrian asked. Specifically, Tamsin's lips curled back slightly, revealing white teeth. It wasn't a smile. Because the planet below is singing Auditor. The howl wave is starting. And when the planet sings my kind, we become difficult to administrative stability. Adrian knew about the Howl wave. It was the electromagnetic phenomenon generated by the aurora-shrouded planet the station orbited. For humans, it was just static on the radio. For species like the Lycari, whose biology was attuned to electromagnetic resonance, it was chaos. It made them stronger, faster, and volatile. "You aren't volatile," Adrian noted. "You are polite." "I am trying," she gritted out, "but it is getting louder." Adrian made a decision. It wasn't a heroic decision. It was a decision born of the fact that he was tired. He was wearing pajamas, and he did not want to explain a dead Lycari body to the morning shift supervisor. "Stay on your side," Adrian said stiffly. "If you shed on my pillow, I am billing you." He turned off the light. He lay in the dark eyes, wide open, listening to the ragged breathing of the monster in his bed. He felt the heat radiating from her body. It was burning hot like a furnace. For 45 minutes, Adrian Locke did not move. At 4 o'clock exactly, a low, thrumming hum passed through the room. The lights on the control panel flickered blue, then green. The moonlight census had swept the room. It paused. Adrian held his breath. The sensor was analyzing the biomass. One human male. And something else. Just noise. A lover's embrace. A blanket anomaly. The light turned solid green. Verified. Beside him, Tamsin let out a long, shuddering breath. "Thank you," she whispered in the dark. "Go to sleep," Adrian snapped, clutching his duvet. "And don't touch me." The morning simulation began at 6:30. The lights in the hallway outside slowly shifted from amber to a pale clinical blue, mimicking a dawn that none of them had seen in years. When Adrian woke, the bed was empty. He sat up, panic flaring in his chest, scanning the room. The window shutters were still down. The air was still recycled. "I am in the closet," a voice came from behind the Louvre doors of his wardrobe. Adrian rubbed his face. "Of course, because the bed was just for the audit." "The light outside is too bright," Tamsin said through the slats. "And the Howl wave is stronger during the station's day cycle. I need dark." "I have to go to work," Adrian said, getting out of bed. He felt stiff. He hadn't slept well. "I cannot leave you here. What if maintenance comes? What if there is a fire drill?" "I will be quiet," the closet replied. "I am very good at being nothing." Adrian walked to the wardrobe and opened the door. Tamsin was curled into a tight ball on the floor, nestled between his winter boots and a box of spare air filters. She looked worse than she had the night before. In the daylight simulation, her gray fur looked dull, and the scratches on her arm were angry and red. She looked less like a monster and more like a refugee. "I have a first aid kit in the bathroom," Adrian said, pointing a thumb over his shoulder. "It is for industrial burns and lacerations. Use the dermal regenerator. Do not use the blue gel that is for cleaning drains." Tamsin looked up at him. Her yellow eyes were hazy. "Why?" "Because if you die in my closet, the smell will never come out," Adrian said. He grabbed a uniform from the hanger above her head, moving quickly to avoid touching her. "I will be back at 1800 hours. Do not answer the door. Do not order food. Do not howl." "I do not howl," she muttered, closing her eyes. Adrian locked the door from the outside. He checked it twice. Then he walked to the transit tube, his heart feeling like a stone in his chest. The Department of Atmospheric Regulation and Audit was a place of white walls, glass screens, and silence. It was located on level 12, suspended near the central spine of the station. Adrian sat at his desk, surrounded by holographic displays of pressure valves and oxygen scrubbers. Usually, the cascading columns of numbers soothed him. Today, they looked like gibberish. "You're vibrating," a voice said. Adrian jumped, nearly knocking over his flask of algae coffee. Dr. Nia Park was leaning against his cubicle partition. She was the station's lead neurobiologist, a woman with sharp eyes and a terrifying intellect. She was also the closest thing Adrian had to a friend, mostly because she was the only one who laughed at his jokes about tax codes. "I am not vibrating," Adrian said, straightening his datapad. "I am recalibrating my focus." "Your cortisol levels are spiking," Nia said, tapping the smartwatch on her wrist. "I can smell the stress pheromones from the corridor. What happened? Did you find a rounding error in the oxygen budget?" "Nothing happened," Adrian said. "Bad sleep, noisy pipes." Nia studied him. She didn't buy it. She was a woman who dissected brains for a living. She knew when a synapse was misfiring. "Have you seen the news feeds, Adrian?" "I try to avoid them. They depress me." Nia reached over and tapped his screen, bringing up the station-wide alert channel. A face appeared. It was a face made of hard angles and cold authority. Calder Hargrove, head of biosecurity retrieval. Unregistered biological entities posing a threat to station cohesion. Hargrove's voice was smooth, like oil on steel. "The Moonlight Census has detected irregularities in the lower sectors. We are initiating a Level 4 sweep. Every sector, every room, every vent will be physically inspected. If you are harboring unauthorized biomass, you will be treated as a contagion source." Adrian felt the blood drain from his face. Level 4. That includes physical inspections. "Starting today," Nia said, watching him closely. "Hargrove is on a warpath. He thinks the Howl Wave is driving the hidden species, the ones who sneak aboard, crazy. He wants to purge them before they snap." "That seems excessive," Adrian managed to say. "It is efficient," Nia said, her voice dropping. "But between you and me, it is cruel. I have seen the autopsy reports on the ones they retrieve. They aren't monsters, Adrian. They're just scared." She leaned in closer. "If you know something, Adrian, if you saw something in the vents." "I didn't," Adrian said too quickly. "I am an auditor doctor. I look at spreadsheets. I don't look at vents." Nia held his gaze for a long moment. Then she sighed and pushed off the partition. "All right, just be careful. Hargrove isn't just looking for aliens. He's looking for sympathizers. And you look like you have a guilty conscience written on your forehead in permanent marker." She walked away, her lab coat swishing behind her. Adrian stared at his screen. The alert flashed red. Biosecurity Team Alpha, deploying to Residential Sector 4 at 1400 hours. 1400 hours, 2 p.m. He was currently at work. Tamsin was in his closet. If he stayed at his desk, the team would breach his apartment. They would find her. They would kill her. And when they checked the logs, they would see that he had been in the room with her all night. They would arrest him for harboring a contagion. His career was over. His safety was over. He looked at the clock, 12:30. Adrian Locke, the man who never took risks, the man who lived by the checklist, closed his eyes. He thought about the wolf woman curling up among his boots. He thought about her polite refusal to scream. He thought about the blood on her shoulder. "I do not eat engineers." "Damn it," Adrian whispered. He opened his command console. He had access to the atmospheric controls for the entire residential ring. It was a privilege, meant for emergency venting in case of fire. He navigated to the submenu for Sector 4, specifically the corridor leading to his apartment block. Valve 4 Alpha, pressure regulation. If he triggered a localized pressure drop just 5%, the safety protocols would slam the blast doors shut. The sector would be sealed off for a mandatory maintenance cycle. No one could get in. No one could get out. Not even biosecurity. It would buy him 6 hours. It was sabotage. It was a felony. It was the end of his perfect, spotless record. His finger hovered over the execute command. "No heroes," he muttered to himself, his voice trembling. He pressed the button. On the main screen, a yellow warning light flared. Alert, pressure variance detected in Sector 4. Initiating lockdown protocols. Access restricted. Around the office, heads turned. Alarms began to bleat softly. "Locke," the supervisor shouted from the glass office. What the hell just happened to Sector 4? I see it, sir, Adrian called out, his voice surprisingly steady. Looks like a valve failure. Automatic containment engaged. I will have to go down there personally to override it. It might take all afternoon. Go, the supervisor waved a hand. Fix it before Hargrove's team gets there. They hate delays. Adrian stood up. He grabbed his datapad. He walked out of the office past the confused face of Dr. Nia Park. He didn't look back. He walked to the lift, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He had just declared war on the station's schedule. He had just locked himself in with the problem. As the lift descended, Adrian realized with a jolt of terror that he wasn't doing this to save his own skin anymore. He had just thrown his skin into the fire. He was doing it because she had wiped her feet. The corridor to his apartment was bathed in the flashing amber light of the lockdown alarm. Heavy blast doors had slammed down at both ends of the hall, sealing off the block. Adrian swiped his keycard at his door. It opened with a hiss. Tamsin! He called out. The closet door burst open. Tamsin scrambled out, moving on all fours before rearing up to a crouch. Her eyes were wild, the pupils dilated so wide the yellow was almost gone. The howl wave was peaking. The air, she gasped, clawing at her throat. The pressure changed. The song changed. I did that, Adrian said, locking the door behind him and throwing the deadbolt. I triggered a lockdown. Biosecurity is outside, but they can't get in for at least 4 hours. Tamsin looked at him. She stood up slowly, towering over him by a good 4 inches. The feral panic in her eyes receded, replaced by a stunned confusion. You sabotaged your station. I created a logistical delay, Adrian corrected, leaning against the door, his legs suddenly feeling like jelly. I am an auditor. We call it creative bureaucracy. Why? Tamsin asked. She took a step toward him. She smelled of his antiseptic soap and wild animal musk. Because, Adrian said, struggling to find the logic in what he had done. Because you are a terrible houseguest, and if they shoot you, you will definitely stain the carpet. Tamsin stared at him. Then a strange sound rumbled in her chest. It was a laugh, a dry, rasping laugh. You are a very strange human, Adrian Locke. I am a criminal human now, Adrian said, sliding down the door until he was sitting on the floor. He put his head in his hands. Oh God, I am going to prison. They are going to make me wear orange. Orange is not my color. Tamsin sat down in front of him. She reached out a hand with sharp black claws, and hesitated. Then, very gently, she poked his knee with one finger. We have 4 hours, she said. Make some tea, and I will tell you how we are going to survive the next 4. Adrian looked up at her. The fear was still there, vast and consuming, but for the first time in his life, the isolation was gone. Tea, Adrian said. Yes, Earl Grey. Hot. Outside the blast doors, the heavy boots of Calder Hargrove's team began to pound against the metal, demanding entry. But inside, the kettle began to whistle. For the next 3 days, Adrian Locke's life became a series of heart attacks, spaced out by intervals of administrative paperwork. The routine he had cultivated for 10 years, wake-up coffee checklist, transit work, transit sleep, was shattered. It was replaced by a new, terrifying rhythm. He was no longer just an auditor. He was a jailer, a co-conspirator, and a host to a creature that technically did not exist, and definitely should not have been eating his emergency rations. The mornings were the hardest. Leaving the apartment felt like abandoning a grenade with the pin pulled. Adrian stood by the door on the second morning, adjusting his collar. The air in the room was thick with the scent of ozone and the heavy, musky warmth of the Likari. Tamsin was already in her daytime position. She had colonized the bottom of his wardrobe, pushing aside his winter boots and his collection of vintage circuit boards to create a dark, cramped den. I am leaving, Adrian whispered to the louved doors. The blast doors on the sector are still down, but maintenance crews are drilling through the outer locks. I have authorized a secondary delays protocol citing a toxic leak, but that will only buy us another 12 hours. From the darkness of the closet, a pair of yellow eyes blinked. Bring more of the protein squares, Tamsin's voice rumbled muffled by his hanging coats. But not the green ones. The green ones taste like wet cardboard mixed with regret. The green ones are algae-based, Adrian whispered back, checking the hallway sensor. They are the most expensive item in my pantry. Then you are being robbed, she replied. Go, act normal. Do not sweat so much. Adrian stepped out into the corridor. The lights were flashing a slow, rhythmic amber, signaling the ongoing lockdown. He walked past the sealed blast doors, where a team of technicians was arguing over a schematic. He kept his head down, his datapad clutched to his chest like a shield. He felt like everyone was looking at him. He felt like he had the words, "Harboring fugitive," stamped across his forehead in neon ink. But no one looked. They were too busy complaining about the detour required to get to the cafeteria. This was the strange duality of his new existence. On the surface, he was Adrian Locke, the boring guy from atmospheric regulation, who probably ironed his socks. Underneath, he was a man holding the door shut against a storm. Nighttime was a different country. When Adrian returned to the apartment, usually around 1900 hours, the dynamic shifted. The apartment was no longer his sanctuary of silence. It was occupied territory. On the third night, he came home to find Tamsin sitting on his kitchen counter. She was not supposed to be out of the closet, but the blinds were drawn so tightly that the room was a tomb of darkness. She was holding a packet of freeze-dried coffee, turning it over in her clawed hands with an expression of profound disgust. This explains a lot about your personality, Tamsin said, without looking up. Adrian locked the door and engaged the deadbolt. He dropped his bag on the floor. Get off the counter. That is for food preparation, not for whatever you are doing. I am inspecting your resources, Tamsin said, hopping down. She moved with a fluid, terrifying grace that made Adrian feel like he was moving underwater. She was wearing one of his spare t-shirts, which was comically tight across her shoulders, and a pair of his sweatpants that she had rolled up at the ankles. She looked ridiculous. She looked dangerous. It is basically charcoal water, she continued, tossing the coffee packet onto the table. I tried to make some while you were gone. It smells like a burnt forest. It is a premium blend, Adrian defended, walking over to pick up the packet. And how did you boil the water? I have a child lock on the dispenser. I have claws, Tamsin said, simply holding up a finger that ended in a sharp black point. And your security protocols are adorable. Adrian sighed, rubbing his temples. You cannot just hack my kitchen appliances, Tamsin. If you trigger a smart home alert, the central server will log the activity. I disconnected the Wi-Fi module on the kettle, she said. And the toaster, and the fridge. Your appliances talk too much. The fridge was trying to order more milk. I canceled it. You canceled my milk order, Adrian stared at her. I need calcium. You need to not be tracked, Tamsin countered. She leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. The movement caused the muscles in her arms to ripple under the gray fabric of his shirt. Every time your fridge orders milk, it pings the logistics server. The logistics server pings the delivery drones. The drones are currently being monitored by biosecurity to track movement patterns. I just saved you from a data trail. Adrian opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He looked at the fridge. It was true. He hadn't thought about the passive data. He was an auditor. He looked at the numbers on the page. He rarely thought about the invisible web that generated them. You are paranoid, Adrian said, but there was no heat in it. I am hunted, Tamsin corrected. There is a difference. Paranoia is a delusion. Being hunted is a set of facts. She walked past him to the small living area. Adrian watched her. She was limping less today. The dermal regenerator had done its work on her shoulder, though the fur was still matted and missing in patches. Sit, she commanded, pointing to his own sofa. This is my apartment, Adrian muttered, but he sat. Tamsin sat on the floor, her back against the wall facing the door. It was always her position. She never sat with her back to an entrance. Tell me about the station, she said. Not the maps, I know the maps. Tell me the rhythm. When do the shifts change? When does the water pressure drop? Who is the weak link in the security grid? Adrian loosened his tie. Why do you need to know? Because the howl wave is getting louder, Tamsin said softly. She tapped the side of her head. I can hear it humming in the bulkheads. The metal is singing. My biology is reacting. It is getting harder to stay still. If I have to run, I need to know the rhythm of the enemy. Adrian looked at her. He saw the tension in her jaw, the way her hands kept flexing open and closed. The Lycari. Adrian began testing the word. The database says your species is from a high-gravity moon. It says you are aggressive and territorial. The database was written by people who wanted to sell us as mercenaries, Tamsin said dryly. We are not aggressive. We are resonant. Our nervous systems act like antennas. On our homeworld, we use it to communicate over miles. We feel the magnetic poles. We feel the weather changing before the clouds form. She looked up at the ceiling, toward the unseen planet, looming above the station. But here, with that planet, the aurora down there is a magnetic storm. It is screaming at us constantly. It overloads the senses. Imagine someone holding a microphone to a speaker right next to your ear forever. That is what the howl wave feels like. It makes us erratic. It makes us panic. And the moonlight census, Adrian asked. A biological trap, she said. The station emits a counter-frequency during the scan. For humans, it is just a scan. For us, it is a momentary silence. A moment of peace in the noise. We are drawn to it. We come out of hiding to feel the relief, and then... She snapped her fingers. Detected. Tagged. Removed. Adrian felt a cold knot in his stomach. That is monstrous. They are baiting you with pain relief. They call it pest control, Tamsin said. She looked at him, her yellow eyes piercing. You humans have a lot of words for cruelty. You wrap them in paperwork and call it procedure. Adrian looked down at his hands. I am just an auditor. I check the air filters. You are the one who locked the blast doors, Tamsin said. You have power, Adrian. You just decided a long time ago not to use it. The next day at work, the guilt was a physical weight in Adrian's pocket. He was standing in the cafeteria line, staring at a tray of reconstituted mashed potatoes, when Dr. Nia Park slid her tray next to his. Potatoes again, she said cheerfully. I hear they added extra starch today. Exciting times. Adrian managed a weak smile. Stability is underrated, Doctor. Nia didn't smile back. She steered him toward a corner table away from the other engineers. She sat down and opened a carton of juice, her eyes scanning his face. So, she began casually, the maintenance logs for Sector 4 are interesting. Adrian's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Are they? I haven't had time to review the final reports. I bet, Nia said. Because the report says the pressure valve that failed, the one that triggered your lockdown, was replaced 2 weeks ago. It was brand new, Adrian. German engineering, rated for 50 years of service. Adrian forced himself to chew. The potatoes tasted like wet chalk. Manufacturing defects happen, Nia. Even with German engineering. A microfracture in the seal, perhaps. Perhaps, Nia said. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. Or perhaps someone sent a manual override command from a terminal with your access code. Adrian put his fork down. He looked at his friend. Nia Park was brilliant, but she was also part of the station's elite. She had dinner with the administrators. Are you asking me a question, Nia, or are you reading my rights? Nia's expression softened. She looked genuinely worried. I am asking you to be careful. Calder Hargrove isn't an idiot. He knows that Valve didn't break itself. He has teams sweeping the perimeter of the lockdown zone. He is just waiting for the doors to open. "Why are you telling me this?" Adrian asked. "Because," Nia said, looking down at her juice. "I ran a simulation on the Howl Wave yesterday. Based on the new atmospheric data, the frequency isn't just affecting the aliens, Adrian. It is destabilizing the station's core AI. The Moonlight Census. It is not just about finding illegal immigrants. The station is feeding on the biofeedback. It needs the emotional resonance of the hunt to recalibrate its logic matrix." Adrian stared at her. "The station is eating the panic." "It is harvesting the data of fear," Nia corrected. "To learn how to predict chaos. We are not just clearing pests. We are training a god. And I don't think I like what we are teaching." She reached across the table and squeezed Adrian's hand briefly. "If you are hiding something or someone in Sector 4, get them out. Before the doors open." She stood up and walked away, leaving her tray untouched. Adrian sat there for 5 minutes, watching the steam rise from his potatoes. He felt sick. The station wasn't just a habitat. It was a predator. And he was living in its stomach. "Hey, Gloomface!" A heavy hand slapped Adrian on the back, nearly knocking the wind out of him. He turned to see Raffi Mercer, the station's head of sanitation and waste disposal. Raffi was a short, barrel-chested man who always smelled faintly of industrial solvent and peppermint. "Raffi," Adrian wheezed. "Personal space." "You don't have any," Raffi grinned, sliding into the seat Nia had just vacated. He grabbed Nia's untouched apple and took a bite. "Man, you look terrible. You look like you got rejected by a vending machine. What's up? The lockdown got you sleeping on the sofa." "Something like that," Adrian said. Raffi was loud, obnoxious, and utterly devoid of tact. He was also the only person on the station who knew the vent systems better than the blueprints. "Yeah, well, count your blessings," Raffi chewed loudly. "My guys are working triple shifts. Hargrove has us welding shut the secondary drainage pipes. Says he doesn't want rats scuttling around in the sewers." Adrian's ears perked up. "All the drainage pipes?" "Most of them," Raffi shrugged. "But between you and me, the guy is a map reader, not a pipe crawler. He missed the expansion joints on level 9. You know, the old thermal exhaust tunnels. Too hot for sensors, too narrow for drones. If I was a rat, that is where I would be," Raffi winked. It was a joke to him. Just another day of outsmarting the suits. But to Adrian, it was a lifeline. "Level 9, Adrian repeated, memorizing it. "Thermal exhaust." "Don't get any ideas," Raffi laughed. "Unless you want to get cooked. It is 60 degrees in there. But hey, beats getting shot by Hargrove's goons, right?" "Right," Adrian said. "Beats getting shot." That evening, the lockdown was lifted. The blast doors retracted with a groan of metal on metal. Adrian hurried down the corridor, expecting to see biosecurity waiting at his door. But the hallway was empty. It was quiet. Too quiet. He entered his apartment. Tamsin was not in the closet. She was sitting at his small dining table. On the table was a datapad. His old datapad. The one he had buried in the bottom of his junk drawer 3 years ago. Adrian froze. "I told you not to touch my things." Tamsin looked up. Her expression was unreadable. "I was looking for a weapon. I found a ghost." She tapped the screen. It lit up, displaying a document application for off-world transfer. Destination Colony Theta. Status approved. Date 3 years ago. "You were leaving," Tamsin said. "You had a ticket. You had a job waiting for you on a terraformed world. Real air. Real sky. No checklists." Adrian walked over and took the datapad from the table. He turned the screen off. "It was a long time ago." "Why didn't you go?" Tamsin asked. Adrian sighed. He walked to the window, staring at the blackout shutter. "Because it was risky. The colony is new. Unstable. The mortality rate for transport is 5%. Here, the mortality rate is 0 as long as you follow the rules. So you stayed, Tamsin said, to be safe. I stayed because I am good at this, Adrian snapped, turning to face her. I am good at keeping things running. I am good at systems. Out there, I would just be another colonist trying not to die. You are dying here, Adrian, Tamsin said quietly. You are just doing it very slowly. You have polished your cage so well you think it is a palace. I am optimizing my risk, Adrian shouted. The outburst surprised him. He never shouted. That is what I do. I manage variables. And right now you are the biggest, most chaotic variable I have ever encountered. You are a walking statistical anomaly. Tamsin stood up. She didn't look angry. She looked sad. You are brave, Adrian, she said. I am not brave, he scoffed. I am terrified. No, she shook her head. You are brave in a hiding way. It takes a lot of strength to hold up a wall that heavy for so long. But you are tired. I can smell it. She walked over to the small kitchenette. She reached for the kettle. What are you doing? Adrian asked, his anger deflating as quickly as it had risen. I am making coffee, she said. And I am going to do it right this time. No charcoal. Adrian watched her. She moved with purpose. She measured the water. She checked the temperature. She waited for the water to cool slightly before pouring it over the grounds, just the way he had done it the morning before. She had watched him. She had memorized his ritual. She brought the mug to him. Steam curled off the dark liquid. Here, she said. Drink. It is safe. Adrian took the mug. Their fingers brushed. Her skin was hot, burning with that high metabolic fire. He looked into her yellow eyes and saw an intelligence and a depth of feeling that no spreadsheet could capture. He took a sip. It was perfect. It is good, Adrian said softly. I learn fast, Tamsin said. A small, tentative smile touched her lips. It changed her entire face. She wasn't a wolf. She wasn't a monster. She was just Tamsin. For a moment, the station, the census, and the howl wave didn't exist. There was just the smell of coffee and the quiet hum of two people standing in a kitchen pretending the world wasn't ending. The peace lasted exactly 12 hours. The next day, the announcement came. It wasn't a broadcast. It was an invasion. Adrian was at his desk when the main doors of the atmospheric department slid open. Two biosecurity officers in full tactical armor stepped in, flanking a man in a pristine charcoal gray suit. Calder Hargrove. The office went deathly silent. Hargrove didn't look like a soldier. He looked like a surgeon. He was tall, thin, and possessed a stillness that was deeply unsettling. He walked through the rows of cubicles, his eyes scanning the faces of the terrified engineers. He stopped at the supervisor's office, but he didn't go in. He turned and looked out over the floor. Attention, Hargrove said. His voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. The Moonlight census schedule has been amended. Due to the confirmed presence of destabilized biological entities, the final resonance sweep will not happen in 3 days. He paused, letting the silence stretch. It will happen tonight, at 2200 hours. Adrian felt his heart stop. 10 p.m. tonight. This will be a maximum intensity sweep, Hargrove continued. Every sector will be subjected to a resonance frequency of level 10. It will be uncomfortable, it will be thorough, and it will flush out anything that does not belong. Hargrove's eyes seemed to drift across the room, locking onto Adrian for a fraction of a second. It might have been his imagination. It might have been guilt. But Adrian felt a chill go down his spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Cooperation is mandatory, Hargrove said. That is all. He turned and walked out. The room exploded into whispers. Adrian didn't move. He stared at the clock. It was 1400 hours. He had 8 hours. 8 hours before the station screamed at level 10. 8 hours before Tamsin was burned out of his apartment like a virus. He stood up. He didn't care about his shift. He didn't care about the checklist. He ran. He burst into the apartment sweating and gasping for air. Tamsin was awake. She was pacing the small living room, her claws clicking on the floor. She stopped when she saw his face. "They moved it up," she said. It wasn't a question. "Tonight," Adrian gasped, locking the door. 10 o'clock, maximum intensity. They are going to vibrate the walls. Tamsin closed her eyes. She swayed slightly, as if hit by a physical blow. Level 10. That is lethal for me. The resonance will boil my blood. I won't just be found, Adrian. I will be incapacitated. I will scream. "We have to leave," Adrian said. "Now." Rafi told me about the thermal exhaust tunnels on level 9. They are too hot for sensors. If we can get there. "No," Tamsin said sharply. She opened her eyes. They were glowing, the pupils blown wide. "You cannot go." "What?" "I am leaving," Tamsin said. She moved to the closet and grabbed a small pack she had put together, a few protein bars, a bottle of water. "I will take my chances in the vents. But you are staying here." "You won't make it to the vents," Adrian argued. "The corridors are crawling with guards. You need my access card to get through the bulkheads." "And if you are caught with me," Tamsin stepped close to him. She grabbed him by the shoulders. Her grip was iron hard. "Do you understand what they do to sympathizers? They don't just fire you, Adrian. They wipe you. They erase your identity. You become unpersonnel." "I don't care," Adrian lied. He did care. He was terrified. But the thought of her dying alone in a vent was worse. "I care," Tamsin hissed. Her face was inches from his. "You are a good man, Adrian Locke. You are a boring, fussy, terrified good man. I will not be the reason your life is destroyed." "My life is already destroyed," Adrian shouted back. "The moment you wiped your feet on my rug, my life was over. I can't go back to the checklist, Tamsin. I can't go back to pretending that this," he gestured at the walls, "is enough. I don't want to be safe anymore. I want to be right." Tamsin stared at him. The ferocity in her eyes softened into something painful. She reached up and touched his face, her claws retracting her pads rough against his skin. "You are an idiot," she whispered. "I am an auditor," he corrected, his voice shaking. "And I have calculated the variables. The probability of you surviving alone is 0. The probability of us surviving together is slightly higher than 0. Tamsin let out a shaky breath. She looked at the clock. 7 hours left. "If they scan here," she said, her voice low and deadly serious, "and if I am still in this room, the resonance will link us. They will see my fear in your heartbeat. They will see my biology grafted onto your heat signature. If they scan here, Adrian, you will be dragged down with me. There will be no explaining it away, no glitch. We will be one single target." Adrian reached up and covered her hand with his. "Then we better not be here when they scan," he said. "Get your bag. We are going to level 9. Tamsin looked at him for a long moment, searching for any sign of hesitation. When she found none, she nodded once. "Okay," she said. "Lead the way, auditor." Adrian opened the door. The hallway was empty, bathed in the artificial twilight of the station's evening cycle. He stepped out, leaving the safety of his apartment, the warmth of his bed, and the certainty of his past behind him. He didn't lock the door. He wouldn't be coming back. The transition from alert to hunt happened at exactly 1800 hours. It began with the lights. The warm circadian amber that usually bathed the residential corridors of Hushborn Habitat flickered once, twice, and then died. In its place, the backup arrays engaged, washing the station in a harsh clinical white, a spectrum specifically calibrated to eliminate shadows. It was the color of an operating theater. It was the color of interrogation. Then came the sound. It was not a siren. Sirens were for fires, or hull breaches, panic-inducing and loud. This was a low-frequency thrum, a vibration that started in the floor plating and crawled up the legs, settling in the base of the skull. It was the auditory signature of the core AI waking up to full capacity. "Attention, citizens," the automated voice was polite female and utterly devoid of warmth. "The Moonlight Census has entered Phase 2. Please return to your designated quarters. Please remain stationary. Please ensure your biometric pulses are calm. Compliance is safety." In apartment 4B, Adrian Locke stood in the middle of his living room, staring at a ventilation grate he had unscrewed from the wall. He was wearing his standard-issue gray jumpsuit, but he had rolled the sleeves up. For a man who usually panicked if his pens were not aligned by height, he looked remarkably composed. It was the composure of a man who had already accepted that he was probably going to die. "It sounds like a refrigerator trying to digest a bag of gravel," Tamsin said. She was standing by the open grate. The Lycari was agitated. Her ears were flattened against her skull, and her tail was tucked tight between her legs. The low thrum of the station was clearly irritating her heightened senses. Every few seconds she would shake her head, as if trying to dislodge a fly. "That is the resonance drive," Adrian said, handing her a small black earpiece. "It is warming up the sensors. Put this in your ear. It is a maintenance comms unit, tuned to a closed frequency, channel 6. Tamsin took the device. Her claws clicked against the plastic. She jammed it into her ear, wincing. "It is loud." "It is necessary," Adrian said. "You are going into the subwall intake. It runs parallel to the main corridor, but bypasses the biometric checkpoints. It will dump you out in the tertiary cooling shaft behind the elevators. I will guide you from the maintenance console in the hallway." "And where will you be?" Tamsin asked. "I will be standing in the hallway looking like a confused bureaucrat," Adrian said. "If biosecurity comes, I need to be visible. If I hide, they will breach the door. If I am out there, I can stall them." Tamsin looked at the dark, dusty square of the ventilation shaft. It was barely 2 feet wide. For a creature of her size, it was a coffin. "I do not like small spaces," she admitted, her voice low. "And I do not like armed paramilitary squads," Adrian countered. "We all have our crosses to bear. Go, now." Tamsin hesitated for 1 second, looking at him with those intense yellow eyes. Then she turned and slid into the wall. She moved with a disturbing fluidity, her shoulders collapsing inward to fit the narrow gap. In a moment, she was gone. All that remained was the sound of scraping metal and the faint scent of wild musk. Adrian replaced the grate, but left 2 screws loose, just in case. He grabbed his datapad, took a deep breath, and stepped out into the blinding white corridor. Calder Hargrove did not run. He did not shout. He moved through the station like a scalpel cutting through dead tissue. He was currently on level 6, 2 levels above Adrian, watching a squad of his retrievers sweep a hydroponics bay. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his charcoal suit absorbing the harsh light. "Sector 6 clear, sir," a trooper reported, his voice filtered through a helmet. "Thermal variance within acceptable limits." "Move to Sector 5, Hargrove said softly. "But keep a secondary team on the perimeter. The anomaly we tracked yesterday wasn't a glitch. It was a signature masking itself." Hargrove tapped the side of his glasses. A heads-up display flickered across his retina. He was looking at the energy consumption of the station. "Someone manipulated the pressure valves in Sector 4 yesterday," Hargrove murmured to himself. "A clerical error, they said. A faulty seal." He didn't believe in faulty seals. He believed in human error, and he believed in human treason. "Lieutenant," Hargrove said into his lapel mic, "skip Sector 5. Take Alpha Squad and descend directly to Sector 4. I want to see the maintenance logs for that pressure valve personally, and I want to speak to the auditor who filed the report." "Yes, sir." Moving to Sector 4. Hargrove watched the squad turn and march toward the transit lifts. He smiled, a thin, humorless expression. The hunt was not about speed. It was about geometry. You simply reduced the available space until the prey had nowhere left to exist. Turn left at the junction, Adrian whispered. He was standing at a wall-mounted interface panel halfway down the corridor, pretending to run a diagnostic on the humidity sensors. He had the comms bud in his left ear, hidden by his hair. "It is Dusty." Tamsin's voice crackled in his ear. She sounded breathless. "And there is a fan here. It is spinning." "It is an intake fan," Adrian murmured, tapping meaningless commands into the screen as a neighbor walked past looking terrified. "It is moving at 30% capacity. You can stop it. There is a manual brake switch on the casing. Look for a red lever." "I see no red lever. I see darkness and cobwebs." "Use your night vision," Adrian hissed. "You are a predator, aren't you?" "I am a predator who usually hunts in forests, not inside a toaster," Tamsin snapped back. "Found it. The fan has stopped. I am squeezing through. I think I just ripped your shirt." "That was a vintage cotton blend," Adrian sighed. "Keep moving. You have 50 meters until the vertical drop." The corridor was getting busier. Not with people, the curfew was in effect, but with the tension of the impending arrival. The air felt static. The hum of the census was getting louder, vibrating the tools on Adrian's belt. Suddenly, the lift doors at the end of the hall chimed. Adrian looked up. His stomach dropped. It wasn't a maintenance crew. It was Alpha Squad. 4 figures in matte black riot armor, carrying suppression rifles. And leading them was not Hargrove, but his second in command, a brute of a man named Kalen, whose face was a roadmap of old scars. "Halt!" Kalen barked, raising a hand. Adrian froze. He left his hand on the panel. "Citizen!" Kalen marched up to him, his boots heavy on the deck. "Identify and state your purpose. Curfew is in effect." "Adrian Locke," Adrian said, forcing his voice to remain steady. He pointed to the panel. "System Auditor Class 3. I am monitoring a humidity variance in the sector. Following up on the valve failure from yesterday." Kalen peered at him. The helmet visor was opaque, but Adrian could feel the scrutiny. "This sector is under priority review," Kalen said. "We have orders to sweep every room. Step away from the panel and present your biometrics." Adrian stepped back, raising his wrist. Kalen scanned it with a handheld device. The device beeped green. "You're the one who authorized the lockdown yesterday," Kalen said, his voice suspicious. "I prevented a catastrophic decompression," Adrian lied smoothly. "You are welcome," Kalen grunted. He turned to his squad. "Check the apartments. Start with 4B. That is this one's quarters. If he was stuck here during a leak, maybe he brought something home with him." Adrian felt a cold sweat break out on his back. Tamsin, he thought. "Are you clear?" There was no answer on the comms, just static. "Sir," Adrian said, stepping in front of his door. "My apartment is currently undergoing a sterilization cycle. The chemical levels are hazardous. If you open that door, you will trigger a secondary alarm." "I have a gas mask," Kalen said, shoving Adrian aside. "Open it." Adrian's hand hovered over the keypad. He was out of options. If he opened it, they would find the loose grate. They would track her scent. If he refused, they would arrest him and blow the door anyway. He punched in the code. 1984. The door hissed open. Kalen raised his rifle and stepped inside. "Clear the room." 2 troopers rushed in behind him. They tossed the room. They ripped the sheets off the bed. They opened the closet. They scanned under the sofa. Adrian stood in the doorway, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He watched Kalen stop in front of the ventilation grate. The lieutenant squinted. He reached out a gloved hand and touched the screw Adrian had left loose. It wobbled. Kalen turned slowly to look at Adrian. "This grate has been tampered with." "I was cleaning the filter," Adrian stammered. "Part of the maintenance." "With your bare hands?" Kalen asked. He leaned in, sniffing the air. And why does this room smell like wet fur? Adrian opened his mouth, but no words came out. His brain had finally hit a wall. Logic could not save him here. "Lieutenant," a sharp voice cut through the tension from the hallway. Everyone turned. Dr. Naya Park was striding down the corridor. She was wearing her white lab coat and she looked furious. She was holding a large, complex-looking tablet computer. "What are you doing in this sector?" Nia demanded, marching right up to Kalen, forcing the large man to take a step back. "We are conducting a sweep, Doctor," Kalen said, though his tone lost some of its edge. Even biosecurity was afraid of the science division. "Hargrove's orders." "Well, Hargrove's orders are interfering with my calibration," Nia shouted, waving her tablet. "Do you see these readings? We are testing a resonance dampener in Sector 4. Your heavy boots and your active radios are creating interference patterns. You are scrambling the data for the Moonlight Census." She shoved the tablet in Kalen's face. The screen was a chaotic mess of red lines and graphs. It meant absolutely nothing, but it looked terrifyingly scientific. "If the census fails tonight because you were stomping around in a delicate zone," Nia hissed, "I will personally tell the core AI that it was your fault. Do you want to explain to the machine why it is hungry, Lieutenant?" Kalen looked at the tablet, then at Nia, then at Adrian. He scowled. "We found a loose grate," Kalen muttered. "Of course it is loose." Nia threw her hands up. "We loosened all the grates to increase airflow for the dampening field." "Do you know nothing about atmospheric acoustics?" She turned to Adrian. "And you, Locke, why are you just standing there? I told you to monitor the humidity, not host a tea party for the brute squad. Get back to your console." Adrian blinked. Yes, Doctor. Right away." Kalen glared at them both. He knew he was being hustled, but he didn't have the rank to challenge a lead scientist on technical grounds. "We are leaving," Kalen spat. "But we will be back, once your experiment is done." He signaled his team. They marched out of the apartment, Kalen giving Adrian one last long look before disappearing into the elevator. Adrian let out a breath that felt like it had been held for a year. He slumped against the doorframe. Nia stood there, her chest heaving slightly. She lowered the tablet. She looked at Adrian, and the anger vanished, replaced by a deep, weary concern. "That was too close, Adrian," she whispered. "Thank you," Adrian said. "I owe you, big time." "You owe me the truth," Nia said. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a thread. "I bought you an hour. The dampening field excuse won't hold up once Hargrove sees the logs. Whatever you are hiding, whatever is in your vents, get it to a safe zone, now." She squeezed his arm, her eyes searching his face. "I am a scientist, Adrian. I believe in data, but I also believe in mercy. Don't make me regret this." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the deck plates. Adrian touched his earpiece. Tamsin, are you there?" Silence. "Tamsin." A sound came through the line, a sharp, rhythmic scratching, like metal on metal, and then a sound that chilled Adrian to the bone. Hyperventilation. Short, sharp gasps of panic. "Stuck," Tamsin wheezed. "The walls are singing. Too loud. Cannot move." The tertiary cooling shaft was a nightmare of industrial design. It was a narrow, vertical tunnel filled with pipes that carried liquid nitrogen coolant. It was freezing cold, yet the air was stale and thick with dust. Adrian had to override 3 safety locks to get into the maintenance hatch on level 5. He didn't care. He was past caring about logs. He crawled into the crawl space on his hands and knees. It was dark, lit only by the flashlight clamped between his teeth. "Tamsin," he called out, his voice echoing in the metal tube. He found her 10 meters in, wedged in a junction where the shaft narrowed to pass around a structural pillar. She was curled into a ball, shaking violently. Her hands were clamped over her ears, and her claws were digging deep gouges into the steel floor. The howl wave was peaking here. The metal of the station acted as a conductor, amplifying the electromagnetic song of the planet below. For Adrian, It was just a headache. For Tamsin, it was like being inside a ringing bell. "Tamsin," Adrian said, crawling up to her. She didn't react. Her eyes were squeezed shut, tears leaking from the corners. She was growling a low, continuous sound of pain. "Go away," she gasped. "It hurts. Too loud." "I know," Adrian said. He spat out the flashlight and grabbed her wrists, trying to pull her claws away from the floor. "We have to move. You can't stay here. The sweep will fry you." "Leave me," she snarled, snapping her teeth at him. It was a feral reaction, instinctive and blind. "I am a weapon. I am a danger. Leave me." Adrian didn't flinch. He looked at the wolf woman, this creature of muscle and tooth, who could rip his throat out in a second, and he didn't see a monster. He saw someone who was scared of the noise. He saw himself 10 years ago, hiding in the bathroom during the station's orientation week because the crowds were too big. "You are not a weapon," Adrian said firmly. He let go of her wrists and grabbed her face, his hands framing her furry cheeks. He forced her to look at him. "Look at me, Tamsin. Focus on me, not the walls. Me." Tamsin's yellow eyes flew open. They were wild, swimming with panic. But they locked onto his face. "I am Adrian," he said. "I am an auditor. I am boring. I am quiet. Listen to my voice. It is the most boring voice on the station. Focus on the boredom." Tamsin stared at him. Her breathing hitched. "Boring," she whispered. "Extremely," Adrian nodded. "I have a collection of antique calculators. I sort my socks by fabric density. I am a vacuum of excitement. Listen to me." The growling in her chest stopped. The tension in her shoulders dropped an inch. The human connection, the anchor of his calm, steady presence, was cutting through the static of the howl wave. "You came back," she said, her voice trembling. "Why?" "Because," Adrian said, wiping a smudge of grease from her snout with his thumb. "Because I hate today. I hate the guns. I hate the lights. I hate the fear." He paused, realizing the truth of what he was about to say. "But I am glad you are here. Because if you weren't, I would just be alone with the hate." Tamsin looked at him. For a second, the harsh environment of the shaft faded. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. It was a gesture of absolute trust. A submission, not to authority, but to safety. "Thank you," she breathed. "You're welcome," Adrian whispered. "Now unwedge your hip. We are going to Level 9. Level 9 was a graveyard of old tech. It was the original engineering deck of the Hushborn habitat, abandoned 20 years ago when the new reactor core was installed. The air here was hot, dry, and smelled of rust. They found a small control room that had been stripped of most of its electronics. It was basically a metal box with a lockable door. It was perfect. Adrian sat on the floor, leaning against a rusted server rack. Tamsin lay beside him, her long legs stretched out. The heat of the level was actually soothing for her. It drowned out the cold, sharp frequency of the census. They didn't touch, but they sat close enough that Adrian could feel the radiant heat of her body. It wasn't sexual. It was the camaraderie of soldiers in a foxhole. "Do you think they are searching your room again?" Tamsin asked quietly. "Probably," Adrian said. "I hope they enjoy my collection of unread technical manuals." "What will you do?" she asked. "Tomorrow you cannot go back to work." "I know," Adrian said. He closed his eyes. The realization should have terrified him. He was unemployed, homeless, hunted. But strangely, he felt lighter than he had in years. "I suppose I will have to find a new career. Maybe I will become a revolutionary." "You do not have the chin for it," Tamsin said. Adrian laughed. It was a real laugh, loud and uninhibited. "No, I suppose not. I am better at paperwork. Every revolution needs a logistics officer, right?" "Right," Tamsin agreed. She shifted, resting her head on his shoulder. It was heavy, and her fur tickled his neck. Wake me up if the world ends. I will, Adrian said. They drifted into a fitful sleep, protected by the heat and the silence of the forgotten level. 5 levels up in the central command hub of biosecurity, Calder Hargrove was not sleeping. He was staring at a massive holographic map of the station. The Moonlight census was 90% complete. The station was awash in green lights, signifying clear. But there was a red dot. It wasn't a live signal. It was a ghost, a residual resonance echo. Rewind Sector 4, Hargrove commanded. Layer the thermal history over the resonance spikes. The hologram shifted. A timeline appeared. It showed a heat signature in apartment 4B. 2 distinct signatures, merging into one, then separating. Then, a spike of fear cortisol and adrenaline moving into the walls. Moving down. They went into the vents, Hargrove said softly. The auditor and the stray. He traced the path with his finger. It led down, past the residential decks, past the hydroponics, down to the red zones. Level 9, Hargrove deduced. The thermal exhaust tunnels. Clever. The heat masks the biosigns. Shall I deploy a squad, sir? The technician asked. Hargrove shook his head. No. Level 9 is a maze. And it is dangerous. We don't need to chase them. They are trapped. They have no food, no water, no way off the station. He turned to the technician. Flag Adrian Locke as a Class 1 fugitive. Freeze his accounts. Lock his biometric access. And send a drone to seal the door of apartment 4B. Seal it, sir. Yes, Hargrove said, turning back to the window to look at the aurora-filled void of space. Put a biosecurity seal on it. An invisible one. If he ever tries to go home, if he ever tries to retrieve his past, I want to know. He smiled a cold, predatory smile. He thinks he has escaped, but he has just extended his checkout time. The census isn't over until I say it is over. And tomorrow night, we will flush the pipes. Down in the dark, warm silence of Level 9, Adrian slept unaware that he had just become the most wanted man in the sky. The hunt did not begin with a scream. It began with a chime. It was the standard, pleasant electronic tone of a residential door requesting access. In the cramped, repurposed storage unit on Level 8, where Adrian and Tamsin had taken temporary refuge after being flushed out of the thermal tunnels by a targeted steam vent purge. The sound was louder than a gunshot. Adrian Locke froze. He was holding a nutrient bar halfway to his mouth. His hands, usually steady enough to calibrate microsensors, were trembling. Do not answer it, Tamsin whispered. She was crouched in the corner, her silhouette merging with the shadows cast by the singular, flickering emergency strip light. The howl wave was singing in the metal of the walls, a low, maddening vibration that had kept her pupils dilated and her breathing ragged for the last 6 hours. It is not a request, Tamsin, Adrian whispered back, staring at the control panel. The light on the lock was not the usual amber of a visitor. It was pulsing a rapid, authoritative violet. That is a biosecurity override code. They aren't asking to come in. They are letting me know they are coming in. The chime sounded again, followed by a voice. It was calm, cultured, and terrifyingly reasonable. Mr. Locke, the voice of Calder Hargrove, filtered through the speaker. I know you are inside. I know you are tired. And I know you are calculating the structural integrity of the back wall. Please save us both the paperwork. Open the door. Adrian looked at Tamsin. She was coiled like a spring, ready to launch herself at the first thing that moved. He will kill you, Adrian said softly. He will try, Tamsin corrected. Her voice was guttural, the wolf rising to the surface to meet the threat. Adrian took a breath. He straightened his ruined uniform. He walked to the door. He was an auditor. He dealt with problems face to face. He hit the release. The door slid open with a hydraulic hiss. The corridor outside was bathed in the harsh white light of the Moonlight census inspection protocols. Standing there flanked by two armored enforcers, who held their suppression rifles at the low ready, was Calder Hargrove. He looked immaculate. His suit was pressed, his hair was perfect, and he looked less like a man hunting a monster, and more like a landlord coming to discuss a lease violation. "Good evening, Adrian," Hargrove said, stepping over the threshold without waiting for an invitation. "Or is it morning? The artificial cycles become so blurred down here in the lower decks." Adrian stepped back, keeping himself between Hargrove and the dark corner of the room. "Director Hargrove, to what do I owe the pleasure? I believe my shift ended 2 days ago." "We are not here for your shift, Adrian," Hargrove said, his eyes scanning the room, landing instantly on the shadows. "We are here for the contraband." Tamsin stepped out of the dark. She did not lunge. She did not growl. She simply walked into the light, standing to her full height, which put her eye to eye with the armored guards. She looked exhausted, her fur matted with grease from the tunnels, but her gaze was steady. She was done hiding. "I am not contraband," Tamsin said. Her voice was clear, cutting through the hum of the station. "I am a sentient being, and you are trespassing." Hargrove looked at her. He didn't flinch. He adjusted his cuffs. "Subject 7 Alpha, the Likari stray. You have caused a significant amount of administrative friction for one biological unit." "I prefer Tamsin," she said. "And I prefer a station that doesn't resonate with unauthorized fear frequencies," Hargrove countered. He looked back at Adrian. "You see the problem, Adrian. It is not about hate. I do not hate her. I simply cannot allow a variable that disrupts the equation. The Moonlight Census requires harmony. She is dissonance." "She is a person," Adrian said. He was surprised by how steady his voice was. "She eats terrible protein bars. She complains about the coffee. She is scared of loud noises. That is not a variable, director. That is a neighbor." Hargrove smiled a thin, pitying expression. "You have become attached. It is a common psychological defect. We project humanity onto things that mimic us. It is why people name their robotic vacuums." "If you call her a vacuum," Adrian said, stepping forward, "I am going to file a formal complaint about your workplace conduct." "If you call her a danger," Tamsin interrupted, her eyes narrowing, "then what is he?" She pointed a clawed finger at Adrian. "He is hiding me. He is feeding me. By your logic, he is infected." "He is," Hargrove agreed. He turned to Adrian, his demeanor shifting from polite to transactional. "But infections can be cured, Adrian. That is why I am here personally. I am offering you a plea bargain." Hargrove took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Step aside. Let the officers secure the asset. We will take her to the containment wing. It will be quick, painless mostly. In exchange, your record is scrubbed. The valve incident, a training exercise. The missing shifts, medical leave. You keep your pension. You keep your apartment. You go back to your checklists." He paused, letting the offer hang in the stale air. "You are a creature of order, Adrian. I have read your file. You hate chaos. You hate uncertainty. Look at her." Hargrove gestured to Tamsin. "She is chaos incarnate. She is a lifetime of running, hiding, and fear. Is that what you want, or do you want your quiet life back?" Adrian looked at Tamsin. She was looking at him. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't begging. She was just waiting. She had told him once that she was a lease he didn't know he signed. Adrian looked at his hands. They were dirty. His fingernails were broken. He hadn't filled out a checklist in 48 hours. "You are right," Adrian said to Hargrove. "I love order. I love safety. I spent 10 years building a wall of paperwork to keep the world out." Hargrove nodded, satisfied. "Smart man." "But," Adrian continued, looking up, his eyes hard, "I found out something interesting recently. Safety is boring. And you are boring, director. You are just a man with a bigger checklist and a gun. He moved, placing himself physically in front of Tamsin. If she is a risk, then what am I? Adrian asked, a dry, sharp smile touching his lips. Am I a glitch, or am I just a conscientious obstacle? Hargrove's smile vanished. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. You are a disappointment, Hargrove said coldly. Officers, secure them both. The guards stepped forward, raising their rifles. The whine of the charging capacitors filled the room. Wait! The shout came from the corridor. Dr. Nia Park burst through the open door breathless, her lab coat flapping behind her. She was holding a massive data pad, and she looked like she had just run down 12 flights of stairs. Stop! Nia yelled, thrusting the data pad between the guards and Adrian. You cannot fire those weapons in here, Hargrove sighed, closing his eyes for a brief moment of irritation. Dr. Park, I assume you have a scientific reason for interrupting a security operation, or are you just looking to join them in the brig? I have a physics reason, Nia snapped. She tapped the screen, displaying a frantic red graph. We are in the lower residential tier directly above the primary power coupling for the census array. The Howl wave resonance is currently at 90% capacity. If you discharge high-energy suppression rounds in this room, the electromagnetic backlash will not just stun them. It will arc through the floor plating and short-circuit the entire southern hemisphere of the station. She glared at Hargrove. Do you want to explain to the core AI why half the station went dark during the most critical scan of the decade? Because I won't write that report for you. Hargrove hesitated. He looked at the guards, then at the floor. It was a bluff, or at least a partial exaggeration, but Hargrove was a man who respected risk assessment. Stand down, Hargrove ordered the guards. Switch to kinetic restraints. We will do this the old-fashioned way. The guards lowered their rifles and reached for the batons on their belts. Now, Nia screamed at Adrian. Run, you idiot! Suddenly, the ventilation grate on the back wall, the one Adrian had been eyeing earlier, exploded inward with a deafening clang. Raffi Mercer tumbled out of the hole covered in dust and holding a plasma cutter. I am not a distinct tactical asset, Raffi yelled, scrambling to his feet. I am a sanitation engineer. I did not sign a contract to die for a romance novel subplot. Raffi, Adrian shouted, grabbing Tamsin's arm. The tunnel is clear, Raffi shouted, pointing at the hole he had just made. Go, go, I rigged the pressure seal to blow in 30 seconds. Adrian didn't hesitate. He shoved Tamsin toward the hole. Go, Tamsin dove into the tunnel. Adrian followed, scrambling over the jagged metal edges. Get them, Hargrove barked, losing his cool for the first time. The guards surged forward. Raffi stood in front of the hole, holding his plasma cutter like a weapon. Hey, do you know how much paperwork it takes to authorize a wall breach? You guys are going to wait until I file the permit. One of the guards shoved Raffi aside, sending him sprawling into a pile of crates. The guard dove into the tunnel after Adrian. The chase was not a sprint. It was a collision course with the station's anatomy. The maintenance tunnel dumped them out into a red-lit service corridor on level 7. The alarm klaxons were blaring now, a rhythmic, deafening whoop-whoop that synced with the pulsing emergency lights. Up, Adrian gasped, pointing to the ladder at the end of the hall. We have to get to the pressure control deck. They ran. Tamsin was faster, her Likari physiology built for bursts of speed. She ran on all fours for efficiency, her claws digging into the grate flooring for traction. Adrian struggled to keep up, his lungs burning. Behind them, the heavy boots of the biosecurity guards thundered against the metal. Stop! A voice amplified by a helmet speaker boomed. Biosecurity halt immediately. A kinetic round, a heavy rubber bullet encased in a stunning charge, whizzed past Adrian's ear and ricocheted off the bulkhead with a spark. They are shooting, Adrian yelled unnecessarily. Keep moving, Tamsin roared. She reached the ladder and scrambled up it in seconds. She reached down, grabbing Adrian by the back of his jumpsuit and hauling him up just as another round slammed into the ladder rung where his hand had been a second before. They burst onto the pressure control deck. It was a maze of massive pipes, hissing valves and narrow walkways suspended over a dark drop that went down to the reactor core. "Where are we going?" Tamsin shouted over the noise of the steam. "Sector 12, Adrian yelled, checking his wrist comp. "The periphery." "The census sensors are weakest at the outer hull. If we can get to the airlock staging area, we can hide in the external cargo pods." They sprinted across the walkway. The station was fighting them. The howl wave was peaking. The metal floor vibrated so hard it made Adrian's teeth chatter. Tamsin stumbled. She clutched her head, crying out. "It is too loud!" she screamed. "The song is burning! Focus on me!" Adrian grabbed her arm, pulling her forward. "Focus on my voice. 10% more, just 10%. They reached a heavy blast door. Adrian slapped the control panel. Access denied. Lockdown in effect. "Damn it!" Adrian smashed his fist against the panel. Hargrove locked the sector ahead of us. Behind them, at the far end of the walkway, the door opened. Hargrove stepped out, flanked by 4 guards. He had a pistol in his hand. A real one. "End of the line, Adrian," Hargrove called out. His voice carried eerily well over the steam. "There is nowhere left to run. The census is at 99%. The station sees you. It sees everything." Adrian looked at the door. He looked at Tamsin. She was leaning against the railing, panting, her eyes glazing over as the resonance overwhelmed her. "I can open it," Adrian whispered. "But I need to override the safety protocols manually. It will take time." "How much time?" Tamsin gasped. "Too much," Adrian said. He looked at the guards advancing. They were taking their time. They knew they had won. Adrian looked at the control panel. He looked at the massive atmospheric pipes running above them. A crazy, desperate idea formed in his auditor's brain. An idea that violated 17 safety regulations and 3 laws of physics. "Tamsin," Adrian said, gripping her shoulders. "Listen to me. When I say now, you run through that door. You do not stop. You go to Cargo Pod 4. Do you understand?" "You cannot open it," she said. "I am not going to open it," Adrian said, reaching for his belt tools. "I am going to confuse it." He turned to the main atmospheric pressure valve on the wall. It was marked with a giant yellow skull and crossbones, danger liquid nitrogen coolant, high pressure. "Adrian, no," Tamsin realized what he was doing. "That will freeze the corridor. You will be trapped." "I am an obstacle, remember," Adrian smiled. It was a sad, terrified smile. "Go, please." "I am not leaving you," Tamsin snarled. "Hey," Hargrove shouted, raising his pistol. "Step away from the valve." Adrian didn't step away. He grabbed the emergency release wheel. "Now," Adrian screamed. He spun the wheel. With a sound like a jet engine taking off, the pipe ruptured. A massive wall of supercooled white fog exploded into the corridor. It wasn't just steam. It was a dense, freezing cloud that instantly dropped the temperature to 0. The sensors went blind. The thermal cameras washed out. The guards shouted in confusion as their visors fogged up instantly. "Run!" Adrian shoved Tamsin toward the blast door, but he didn't run with her. He stayed at the valve, fighting the pressure to keep the stream directed at the guards, creating a wall of ice and fog between them and Tamsin. "Adrian!" Tamsin screamed from the fog. "Go!" Adrian roared. "I am right behind you." He wasn't. The cold was seizing his muscles. His hands were freezing to the wheel. He watched Tamsin's shadow disappear into the whiteout. Then he felt the cold barrel of a gun press against the back of his neck. Hargrove had moved through the fog. He was shivering, his perfect suit covered in frost, but his hand was steady. "A valiant effort," Hargrove whispered in his ear, "but mathematically unsound." Adrian let go of the wheel. He fell to his knees, exhausted. He had failed. He had bought her 10 seconds. It wasn't enough. "Get up," Hargrove commanded. "We will watch them hunt her down together." Suddenly, A shadow loomed out of the fog. It was massive. It moved with a speed that defied the freezing cold. Tamsin had come back. She hit Hargrove with the force of a freight train. The impact sent the director flying backward into the railing. The gun skittered across the floor. Tamsin didn't stop to attack him further. She scooped Adrian up physically, lifted him off the ground as if he weighed nothing more than a sack of laundry, and threw him over her shoulder. "Put me down," Adrian wheezed. "You could have escaped." "I don't pay rent for an empty room," Tamsin roared. She charged at the blast door, the sensor confused by the rapid temperature drop, and the chaotic particulate matter in the air flickered. Error. Sensor obstruction. Initiating emergency venting. The door cracked open. Just a foot. Tamsin threw herself through the gap, dragging Adrian with her, just as the kinetic rounds from the recovered guards sparked against the metal. They tumbled onto the other side. Tamsin slammed her fist into the manual override on the other side, locking the door. They were in the cargo staging area. It was dark, quiet, and cold. Adrian lay on the floor, gasping for air. Tamsin collapsed beside him, her chest heaving. "You came back," Adrian whispered, staring at the ceiling. "You stupid, wonderful animal. You came back." "You lied," Tamsin panted. "You said you were right behind me." "I am a liar," Adrian admitted. "I am also freezing." "The periphery," Tamsin said, struggling to her feet. She pulled Adrian up. "We are close. The cargo pods." They limped toward the airlock row. The moonlight census was peaking now. The entire station was vibrating with a deep, resonant thum thum thum. "Here," Adrian pointed to Pod 4. It was a refuse pod scheduled for ejection, but currently docked. "Inside. It is lead-lined. It will block the scan." They scrambled inside the cramped, dark pod. Adrian hit the seal button. The door closed, cutting off the noise, the light, and the hunt. They sat in the dark, huddled together for warmth. Outside, the station reached 100% resonance. The moonlight census swept across the hull, searching for the anomaly. It swept over the blast door. It swept over the frozen corridor. It swept over the cargo pods. Inside the pod, Adrian held his breath. He looked at his wrist comp. Status identity tagged. Access revoked. Priority flag fugitive. He was done. He was erased. The scan passed. The vibration stopped. The station exhaled. "They missed us," Tamsin whispered, her head resting on his chest. "For now," Adrian said. He looked at the red light blinking on his wrist. "But Hargrove knows. He knows I helped you. I can never go back to that apartment, Tamsin. I can never go back to that desk." Tamsin looked up at him in the darkness. Her yellow eyes were soft. "Good," she said. "The desk was too small for you anyway," Adrian laughed. It was a ragged, broken sound. "So what now? We live in a garbage pod." "No," Tamsin said. She took his hand. Her claws were retracted. "We survive. And then we change the locks." They sat in the silence of the periphery, two ghosts in a machine listening to the station return to its cold, orderly sleep. They had won the night. But they both knew that when the sun simulation rose, the war would begin. The cargo pod was a metal coffin suspended in the void, smelling of stale hydraulic fluid and the ozone of recycled air. It was cold, a biting vacuum-adjacent chill that seeped through the soles of boots and settled in the marrow of the bone. Adrian Locke sat with his back against a crate marked Industrial Solvent, Do Not Ingest. He was holding a small, dying thermal battery between his hands, trying to coax the last few joules of warmth from it. "You are hogging the heat," Tamsin said. She was sitting opposite him, her knees drawn up to her chest. In the dim red light of the pod's emergency standby mode, she looked less like a terrifying apex predator and more like a tired commuter stuck at a train station during a blizzard. "I am not hogging it," Adrian replied, his breath misting in the air. "I am managing a critical resource. If my fingers freeze, I cannot open the door panel or if we decide to leave." "Your fingers are fine," Tamsin countered, reaching out a clawed hand to tap the battery. My biology runs hotter than yours. I lose heat faster. It is basic thermodynamics. Give me the brick. Adrian looked at her. He looked at the shiver that ran through her shoulders, rippling the gray fur that was still matted with grease from the tunnels. He sighed a sound that was half annoyance and half affection and slid the battery across the floor, plating toward her. Thank you, she said, clutching it to her chest. She closed her eyes, letting out a soft, chuffing sound of contentment. You are a terrible roommate, Adrian muttered, leaning his head back against the crate. You steal the blankets. You steal the heat. You complain about the coffee. And you snore, Tamsin said without opening her eyes. Like a ventilation fan with a broken bearing. They sat in silence for a long time. It wasn't the heavy, fearful silence of the tunnels. It was a domestic silence, strange and fragile in the middle of a fugitive run. Adrian, Tamsin said softly. Yes. Why did you do it? Adrian turned his head to look at her. Do it the steam valve. That was basic fluid dynamics. I knew the pressure differential would... No, she interrupted, opening her eyes. The yellow irises were dim, now exhausted. Why did you come back in the corridor? You were safe. You could have stayed behind the valve. You could have surrendered and told Hargrove I forced you. He offered you a deal. Your job. Your apartment. Your checklist. Adrian stared at the ceiling of the pod. He thought about his apartment. He thought about the clean lines, the temperature control, the silence. It seemed like a memory from a different life, belonging to a different man. I didn't do it to be a hero, Adrian said, his voice quiet. I hate heroes. Heroes are messy. They break things. He looked at his hands, dirty, bruised, trembling slightly. I did it because 10 years ago I came to the station because I wanted to be part of a system that worked. I thought the rules made us safe. I thought if I checked every box I was a good person. He met Tamsin's gaze. But when I saw you in that corridor, terrified and alone, I realized that a system that requires me to let you die just to keep the spreadsheet balanced isn't working. It is broken. And if I let you die, I am broken too. He paused, searching for the words. I didn't save you to feel good, Tamsin. I saved you because the alternative was to admit that I am just a cog in a machine that grinds people up for fuel. And I am tired of being a cog. Tamsin looked at him for a long moment. Then she shifted. She slid across the floor until she was sitting next to him, shoulder to shoulder. She placed the thermal battery on his lap, sharing the warmth. I was scared too, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Not of the capture. I have been hunted before. I was scared that you would say yes to him. She rested her head on his shoulder. The weight was heavy, solid, real. I was scared that I had ruined a good man, she said. That I had turned your safe life into a tragedy. It was a boring life, Adrian said. He reached out and took her hand. Her palm was rough, the pads leathery, but her fingers interlaced with his perfectly. And besides, tragedy has better dialogue, as they sat there holding hands in the dark, two fugitives sharing a dying battery, while the universe outside tried to decide their fate. Far above them, in the sterile white light of the science division, Dr. Nia Park was looking at a ghost. She was standing at her main console, surrounded by holographic displays of the Moonlight census data. The scan was complete. The station was officially clean. But Nia was looking at the sublayer of the data, the raw feed that went directly to the core AI. It is not a security scan, she whispered to the empty room. The screen showed the emotional resonance of the station's population during the scan. It was a map of fear, spikes of adrenaline, valleys of submission, waves of relief. And all of it was being funneled into the core, feeding the neural network, like coal into a furnace. It is a harvest, she realized, her blood running cold. We aren't protecting the station from the aliens. We are terrifying the population to feed the machine. The door to her lab slid open. Nia jumped, swiping the data off the screen. Raffi Mercer walked in. He looked terrible, His sanitation uniform was scorched, his face was bruised, and he was carrying a mop bucket that smelled suspiciously of illegal moonshine. "Don't shoot," Raffi said, raising his hands. "I am just here to clean up the biological spill in Sector 4, or whatever lie we are telling the shareholders today." Nia slumped in her chair. "Raffi, you should be in hiding. You blew a hole in a bulkhead." "I am a sanitation engineer," Raffi shrugged, setting the bucket down. "I fix leaks. Sometimes I make them. It is a gray area." He walked over to the console and looked at the blank screen. "You figured it out, didn't you?" Raffi asked. His voice was surprisingly serious. Gone was the joker, the loudmouth. In his place was a man who had spent 20 years in the guts of the station. Nia looked at him. "Figured what out?" "That the station doesn't care if we are happy," Raffi said. He leaned against the console, crossing his arms. "It doesn't even care if we are safe. It just cares that we react." He tapped his chest. "I hear the pipes, Doc. I hear the fluid moving in the core. This station isn't a habitat. It is a battery. And we are the acid. The fear, the panic, the compliance that is the current. The census isn't about finding Tamsin. It is about making sure everyone else is scared enough to generate power." Nia stared at him. "How long have you known?" "Years," Raffi said. "Why do you think I drink? But Tamsin disrupts the frequency. The Lycari, they don't broadcast fear like we do. They broadcast chaos. They are like static in the signal. That is why Hargrove wants them gone. They are bad for the reception." Raffi sighed and picked up his mop. "Hargrove isn't chasing them because he hates them, Doc. He is chasing them because if they stay, the core starts to stutter. And if the core stutters, the station wakes up." The cargo pod was running out of air. The CO2 scrubbers were flashing yellow. Adrian knew they had to move. They couldn't stay in the periphery forever. "We need to get to the shuttle bay," Adrian said, standing up and stretching his stiff limbs. "If we can hack a transport drone, we can override the navigation and aim for the colony world." "It is a long shot," Tamsin said, standing up beside him. "But it is better than suffocating in a box." They opened the pod door. The corridor outside was empty. The lights were back to the standard night cycle amber. The station felt calm, deceptively so. They moved quickly, heading inward toward the shuttle docks. But as they moved, Adrian noticed something strange. The doors were opening for them. Not just the residential doors, but the security bulkheads. As they approached a Sector 7 checkpoint, the blast door slid open before Adrian could even reach for his hacking tool. "That is polite," Tamsin murmured, her ears twitching. "Too polite." "Hargrove," Adrian said, stopping in the middle of the corridor. "He is not blocking us. He is funneling us." He looked at the map on the wall. The open doors led a direct path, not to the shuttle bay, but to the central spire, the location of the core AI. "He wants us to go to the core," Adrian realized. "Why? Maybe he wants to kill us in front of his god," Tamsin said, baring her teeth. "No," Adrian shook his head. "Hargrove is pragmatic. If he wanted us dead, he would have vented the atmosphere in this sector 10 minutes ago. He wants us there." "Then we do not go," Tamsin said. "We have to," Adrian said, looking at the blast door behind them. It slid shut with a heavy thud, locked. "We don't have a choice. He is guiding the rat through the maze." They walked. The journey to the central spire took 20 minutes. The corridors were deserted. It was as if the entire station had been cleared just for them. They reached the massive double doors of the core chamber. They opened silently. Inside, the room was vast. It was a cathedral of technology. In the center, suspended in a column of magnetic light, was the core, a pulsating mass of data crystals and fluid that glowed with a rhythmic, hypnotic blue light. Standing in front of the core waiting for them was Calder Hargrove. He was alone. No guards, no guns. He was holding a datapad, looking at the core with an expression that bordered on religious adoration. "Welcome," Hargrove said, his voice amplified by the acoustics of the chamber. "I apologize for the theatrics with the doors. I wanted to ensure you arrived on time." "On time for what?" Adrian demanded, stepping forward. "Another execution." "For the synchronization," Hargrove said calmly. He turned to face them. He looked tired. The perfect facade was cracking at the edges. "You were right, Adrian. I am just a man with a checklist. But the list is not mine. It belongs to it." He gestured to the core. "The station is destabilizing," Hargrove said. "The howl wave is growing stronger. The fear harvest from the census was insufficient. The core is hungry. It needs a stabilizer. It needs a key." Hargrove looked at Adrian. "It needs you." Adrian frowned. "Me, I am a Class 3 auditor. I am nobody." "You are a Class 1 anchor," Hargrove corrected. "Did you never wonder why you were so good at your job, Adrian? Why you felt the atmosphere of the station like it was your own skin? Why could you predict system failures before the sensors picked them up?" Hargrove tapped his datapad. A holographic file appeared in the air between them. It was a medical file. Subject, Adrian Locke. Procedure, neural resonance grafting. Date, 20 years ago. "You were part of the pilot program," Hargrove said. "They grafted a resonance receiver into your neural cortex when you were a child. You were built to be the perfect interface for the station. You are not just an employee, Adrian. You are a component. You were designed to synchronize with the core and stabilize the emotional matrix." Adrian felt the blood drain from his face. He staggered back. "That is a lie. I am just a guy who likes checklists." "You like checklists because the machine likes order," Hargrove shouted, his voice cracking. "Your entire personality, your need for safety, your fear of variables, it is all programming. You are the biological damper for the station." Adrian looked at Tamsin. He wanted her to tell him it was a lie. He wanted her to growl at Hargrove and tear the hologram apart. But Tamsin was not looking at Hargrove. She was looking at the floor. She was not surprised. The silence that stretched between them was louder than the howl wave. "Tamsin," Adrian whispered. Tamsin closed her eyes. She took a deep breath, and when she opened them, there was a sadness in them that was bottomless. "He is telling the truth," Tamsin said. Adrian felt like he had been punched in the gut. "How do you know?" "Because," Tamsin said, her voice shaking. "I didn't pick your room by accident, Adrian." The world stopped. The hum of the core faded. All Adrian could hear was the rushing of his own blood in his ears. "What? I was sent here," Tamsin said. She turned to face him, tears welling in her yellow eyes. "The Likari resistance, we know about the core. We know it feeds on the fear of the station. We know it is becoming a tyrant. We wanted to destroy it." She stepped closer, but Adrian stepped back. "We knew about the anchors," Tamsin continued, the words tumbling out now desperate. "We knew there was a key in Sector 4. My mission was to find you, to get close to you." "Close," Adrian repeated. The word tasted like ash. "You mean the bed, the coffee, the tunnel." "The resonance," Tamsin said. "Likari biology disrupts the core, but we cannot do it from the outside. We need a bridge. We need to link our dissonance with a key. But the key has to trust us. It has to be a voluntary bond, a resonance of belief." She looked at him, pleading. "I needed you to trust me. I needed you to let me in. That was the mission, to use you to break the core." Adrian stared at her. The betrayal was physical. It was a knife twisting in his chest. All the moments, the hand-holding, the shared heat, the "you are a good man." It was a tactic. It was a lock-picking maneuver. "I was a job," Adrian said. His voice was dead. "I was just another checklist." "No," Tamsin shouted. She reached for him but stopped when she saw his flinch. "It started as a mission. Yes, I came to your room to use you. But Adrian, in the closet, in the tunnel, When you stood in front of the valve, that wasn't the mission. That was me. How can I tell the difference? Adrian asked. If I am just a programmed machine and you are just a spy, what is real? Is any of it real? The coffee was real, Tamsin said, a sob breaking through. The fear was real, and the fact that I came back for you was real. I could have left. I could have let you freeze and found another key. But I didn't. I stayed. Because I don't want to break the core anymore. I just want to save you. Hargrove clapped his hands slowly. The sound echoed like gunshots. Touching, Hargrove said. Truly, but irrelevant. The core is critical. Adrian, you have a choice. Step onto the platform. Merge with the core. You will stabilize the station. The fear will stop. The census will end. You will be safe. Forever. He pointed to Tamsin. Or stay with her. The dissonance will tear the station apart. The life support will fail. Everyone dies. But you get to keep your romance. Adrian looked at the core. It was beautiful. It was orderly. It was everything he had ever wanted. A world without variables. He looked at Tamsin. She was a mess. She was chaotic. She was a lie that had become the truth. He looked at Hargrove. You are wrong, Director, Adrian said. About what? About the choice. Adrian walked toward Tamsin. He didn't look at her with anger anymore. He looked at her with a profound, weary understanding. You used me, Adrian said to her. Yes, she whispered. And I saved you, he said. So we are even. He reached out and took her hand. He squeezed it hard. You said you need a voluntary bond to break the synchronization, Adrian said. You need the key to trust the dissonance. Tamsin's eyes widened. Adrian, if we do that, the feedback could kill us. It will shatter the core's control matrix. I am tired of control, Adrian said. He looked at Hargrove. And I am tired of being an anchor. He turned to Hargrove, his eyes blazing with a newfound authority. I am not going to stabilize your station, Calder. I am going to set it free. No, Hargrove screamed, reaching for his weapon. Do it, Adrian said to Tamsin. Howl. Tamsin threw her head back. She didn't make a sound with her throat. She screamed with her mind. She poured every ounce of her Likari resonance, the chaos, the wildness, the refusal to be tamed into the hand that held Adrian's. And Adrian, the man of order, the man of checklists, took that chaos and opened the door. He used his neural graft not to block the signal, but to amplify it. He accepted her. He accepted the mess. He accepted the love. Crack. The sound was not auditory. It was psychic. A massive shockwave of pure, unadulterated emotion exploded outward from the two of them. The core screamed. The blue light turned a violent, chaotic violet. The fluid in the column boiled. Hargrove was thrown backward by the force of the blast. The screens shattered. The holographic checklists disintegrated. The moonlight census shattered. All over the station, the white lights blew out. The oppressive hum of the core vanished, replaced by the sudden shocking silence of a machine that had been turned off. Then, the emergency lights flickered on. Soft, warm, imperfect amber. In the core chamber, the column of light was gone. The machine was dark. Adrian fell to his knees. He was gasping, his nose bleeding, his head pounding like a drum. Tamsin collapsed next to him, unconscious. He crawled over to her. He checked her pulse. It was there. Fast, erratic, but there. Tamsin, he whispered. One yellow eye cracked open. She groaned. Did we break it? We broke it, Adrian said, wiping the blood from his lip. We broke everything. The core is offline. The census is dead. We are going to have so much paperwork. Tamsin let out a weak, wheezing laugh. She reached up and touched his face. You are not a machine, Adrian Locke, she whispered. Machines don't do stupid things like that. I am unemployed, Adrian said, helping her sit up. And I am definitely a fugitive now. Hargrove will want our heads. They looked across the room. Hargrove was gone. He had fled during the chaos. "Let him run," Tamsin said. "The station is awake now. It won't listen to him anymore." Adrian looked at the dark core. He felt a strange emptiness in his head where the connection used to be. The constant, subconscious hum of the station's needs was gone. For the first time in his life, his mind was his own. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. "We have to go," Adrian said, "before the backup systems reboot and realize who caused the blackout." He helped Tamsin to her feet. She leaned heavily on him. They limped toward the door, leaving the ruins of the order behind them. As they reached the corridor, Tamsin paused. She looked at a small, fold-out maintenance cot attached to the wall near the airlock. "Hey," she said, nudging him. "What?" She gestured to the cot, then to the vast chaotic station that lay ahead of them, a station full of people waking up from a nightmare, full of confusion, full of life. "I know I caused a lot of trouble," Tamsin said, a mischievous glint returning to her eyes. "And I know I technically lied about the lease." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But this time I will pay the rent by saving the entire station. Is that acceptable currency?" Adrian looked at her. He looked at the wolf woman who had broken into his bed and broken him out of his cage. He smiled. "It is acceptable," Adrian said. "But the coffee is still your fault," Tamsin laughed. It was a sound like freedom. "Deal," she said. They walked out into the dark, chaotic, beautiful station, hand in hand, ready to face the mess they had made together.